Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us at the Michael Gibson Gallery here in London, Ontario. My name's Jenny Kraling. I'm the Associate Director of the Michael Gibson Gallery, and joining us is Michael Gibson, the owner of the gallery, and Etienne Zack, the artist who we will be talking with today. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction of Etienne for those of you who don't know who he is. He was born in Montreal in 1976, graduated from Concordia, and then Emily Carr in Vancouver. And since then, he's been based in both Vancouver, LA, and now in Point Roberts, Washington. Over his extensive career, since really the early 2000s, he's had multiple exhibitions all across Canada and internationally, including a solo show at the Esker Foundation in 2016 and a solo show at the Montreal Museum of Contemporary Art in 2010. His paintings are collected by the National Gallery of Canada, the Vancouver Art Gallery, the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, the Contemporary Museum in Montreal, and many, many more. Even though we've known Etienne for quite a long time, this is our inaugural, our first solo show with him, called Mind Pictures. It's been going on for 2 months and it actually closes on Saturday. So this is wonderful that this will give us an opportunity to talk at the end of the show and to reflect on the work and to perhaps learn some insights or history behind the beautiful paintings that we've been enjoying for the last 2 months. If you have any questions for Etienne, please type them in the chat, and at the end of our conversation, we can ask Etienne. So welcome, Etienne. It looks like you're not in Point Roberts. Where are you?
It's a pleasure to be with you and with everybody too. No, I'm in Oaxaca, Mexico.
Oh, wow. And what are you doing there?
I'm doing a residency with 4 other artists, Eric Carlos Bertrand, Ed Pien, Johannes Zitz, and David Gagnon.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Great.
So you've been away from us as well and away from your painting, so that perhaps this is an excellent time to revisit some things.
It's great.
Wonderful. Well, as I mentioned in your introduction, I mean, obviously you have a very rich history with painting and working with images and text and language. So I guess to get us started, can you just talk about the impetus behind this body of work, Mind Pictures?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the first bracket is sort of, for me, painting is really a reading and writing medium. So, and so the idea of text and images have been really crucial, a central part of how I see painting, how I think about painting. And this series of work kind of started with, I've always used memory as a device for my work. And so usually I'll try and imagine, or I'll have a picture in my mind that I build over time. Once I see it clearly enough, I can then start to paint it. And that's just, it's not a really kind of translation, like to sort of one-to-one scale. It's sort of like a little bit more fluid than that. Like that's kind of how I've been working. And considering the new digital tools we have, like programs like DALI or any kind of text to image kind of AI programs, I was curious if I could write a text that's quite, elaborate, and to describe this image I had in my mind, and to see if it would produce anything that's even close to what I had in my mind. And throughout this process, about 4 hours spending kind of downloading, it's a little bit of that, a little bit of this, very seductive images, I think, that's for sure. But what started to happen is I could not recall the original image that was in my mind. And so that was for me a little bit of indicative of that space I use as an artist to create my paintings had been completely wiped out using this technology process. So
The
it's
AI
a very
technology, the AI technology, yeah.
Yeah. And so that was the start of kind of elaborating a series of paintings around that. And not all paintings function, sort of, but they relate to this kind of space I'm thinking about in my mind. And I think we all create images in our minds. And so I I I think I'm just curious about this space considering the new technologies.
So what happened with your experiment?
I don't know if it's a failure. I think it was maybe a lesson into how I'm going to use this technology. And I had a conversation recently about how do you trick yourself to the habits you fall into as a painter, as someone that practices a medium regularly every day, and how do you trick yourself to kind of think in different ways? And maybe there is space there for this experiment to start thinking about this experiment in a different way as well. Not just that it erased everything in my mind, but there might be more space there to explore. And so that's another kind of option. But this erasure of image was quite a poignant moment, because I was trying to catch something that was left, and there was nothing left in my mind. So that's a little bit where these paintings come from, is this idea of the space inside of us that is trying to connect with a reality that's coming in, and how does that function? And so these paintings are using text, using a kind of understanding, a way to grasp on reality in some ways.
Is there a,
yeah.
sorry, is there an order to the text? Because I know that when people come in, they ask me a lot, about the text, because it's just really letters that are coming towards them, but they're not really sequential in sense of words. Is that something that you follow the brush, like it just happens? Or is it sort of, you've got a plan of the order of the chaos?
Right. So this series is kind of built in a different way. In a way, it's built in a reverse, because I've always taken notes when I paint. Before I start painting, I take a lot of notes. I read and take notes and gather all this, and slowly images form in my mind from the notes. But in a way, this series is sort of a reversal, where there's a kind of analysis of the image I'm working on when I apply the text on top of the image. And but there's also a whole background of the history of building this series that I've retained, and a kind of, so the letters are applied using a stencil, a very sort of generic stencil that I bought at the dollar store. And they are the characters are lined up to create a narrative. And I guess you could follow the color shifts in the brush strokes and adding color, and you could maybe follow the text. And but the point of it too, for me, is that there is also a process of forgetting, and that's been part of my work as well. Even in previous series, there's a memory process, and there's a forgetting process, which I think is interlinked with memory itself.
The specific painting solarization, it uses text in both in the way that you're talking about, but then also in a really dramatic visual way. Can you talk about a little bit about that painting in particular?
Yeah, I took I've been looking at a lot of Caravaggio paintings when I made these paintings, and I guess I'm thinking about a world we live in where colors are so saturated, and there's a real kind of there's a the bandwidth of color and of information is so wide now that I was interested in his work because he does do that. He has this full black, it's sort of dark to fully bright. And so the painting is based on a painting by Caravaggio, and but it's sort of a dramatic lighting, and I think I wanted that painting to I wanted that painting to feel like there is writing everywhere on the painting, but the light is only illuminating certain parts. And I guess if I push this a little bit more philosophically, it's, I mean, text has been like a crucial part of my work, and it's amazing that we live in such an image-driven world, but there's still underlying text on everything, and so the connection is still there. Like, it's still the language of communication, the language of organization behind everything, and so I guess, yeah, just for me, those are important things to think about in terms of image making, for the way I make images. And so there are these kind of parameters on top of parameters that I kind of think about and conceptualize the paintings in that way.
Can you give us a, like when you talk about all these different dimensions and thoughts and forgetting and remembering and the abstraction part of it, then influenced by, older paintings like Caravaggio, like the timeline, it takes, certain several months to make an exhibition, or 6 months or a year. Like obviously you're down in Mexico now thinking about what's coming.
Yeah.
These ideas, I think sometimes people feel it just happens, but it doesn't really, like a painting like we're talking about, doesn't just happen. You have to remember it, forget it, and it evolves.
Yeah.
But is that over a month, or I know I'm not talking about how long it specifically takes to paint. It's
Yeah.
more the execution of it.
Yeah. It's very unpredictable, and I'm always looking for where the work should go, and there's so many variants and so many ways painting could go. And like, for example, coming here, there's certain environmental, there's certain structures that are just natural that exist in Mexico that I think coming here, the idea of form and the idea of composition, but the sculptural aspect of painting, which has been something that I've been thinking about a lot. Like, when I do make paintings, I project myself, I reduce myself, my eye, to places in the scenes that I paint, and I'm kind of looking around saying, okay, what does the light look like here, like in a specific part of the painting? And so the aspects of the sculptural is really important for me. And if you look at Zapoteco sculptures, there's such a structural, a form that is so um, well, it's so imposing and it's so
Right.
present, and that was a click for me for the next series of paintings. That I can't really talk about it. I don't want to put too much language around it, but
Mm-hmm.
form has been quite. It's something I've been thinking about while I'm here, and there's also travertine kind of formation here with ancient waterfalls that also took on a form. I don't know why, but this caught my eye, and I think I will develop something to do with that.
That's really funny that you said that, because we talked a long time ago about this stacking image that's been repeated throughout your whole body of work, and how in the paintings X and XO in our show, there's this kind of layering or building up of space that
Yeah.
it's obviously in your head because you're seeing it where you are right now. And it's just been this beautiful thread throughout all of your work. And you're building like this is an imagined landscape or a landscape that you've visited. Can you talk about kind of those two paintings a little bit?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've made also paintings like having kind of this idea of layering history where there's sediments, it might be natural sediments, but also the sort of, yeah, how memory works, how you stack things up, how you recall things. And this painting X really, it's the landscape paintings in the show and mind pictures are really, they're sort of, they're memory paintings. So they're places I visited, and they kind of start at the bottom right of the painting and they sort of meander up to the top of the painting. They're a little bit built like sort of traditional Chinese ink paintings, landscape paintings, in the way that they're a journey. And the landscape paintings, well, that one X uses image transfers, so I used the internet to find details or things I could not recall quite, but they're not the actual places I'm trying to recall. They're kind of usually details of things I'm trying to recall. And so I slowly build the painting where I build a story, my own story, and a kind of journey, again, shrinking myself to these spaces and starting to carve out a kind of a landscape. And so that's kind of how they're made, and they're kind of about a sort of a map world, a massive kind of informational kind of world, uh, very multi-layered, where there's much. Well, I've been trying to make high definition paintings in a way, like it's, you know, in a lot of ways, yeah.
And you've presented those two as a pair, or right? And there's two different techniques going on, and I don't know if that's something you've done previously, where one's
No,
strictly
yeah,
painting and one's got a photo transfer.
yeah. So X uses photo transfers, and then XO, the loving one,
Yeah.
embraces the X, but it's sort of like a mirror image, and
Right.
it uses only paint, and it's very approximative and little bit like, for me, it's sort of like an homage to painting when I'm talking about, yeah, using AI tools and things like that. In a way, I was interested in, there's a few paintings in the show that do that. There's sort of a reproduction or a retranslation of 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 another painting, and an ode to painting, really, and to kind of bring back just the brush and the medium and the sort of human mind to 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 just the tradition of making pictures.
Right. Oh,
And
it's a beautiful,
yeah,
beautiful painting.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's well,
But it
it's
does
nice.
that.
It's sort of like a transition also for me. It's in a way like, I wanted to also just make just painting. So
Right.
yeah.
The paintings that Michael's referencing are called Symbiosis and Vacancy. So those are the other pairs, I guess, or mirrored pairs that we have in the exhibition that are interiors. And this, again, one painted, one using photo transfers. And Etienne, you mentioned that these are actually your own photographs that you've taken of spaces where you visited.
Yeah. Yeah, all the interior spaces. So there's sort of like the map-like paintings in the show, and then there's the interior paintings. And the interior paintings, I thought of them just more as that space, that mental space that I described, that I use a lot, that I think a lot of artists use. And so they are pictures that I took of abandoned houses around my studio where I live. And the strange part about these spaces is that the space was left a little bit in a hurried way, where there's still kind of cooking things going on, but they're frozen in time. And I was interested in maybe a metaphor in terms of my experiment, in terms of the sort of vacancy of a space and something that's just sort of disappeared, just like this experiment I had with this sort of mind space where things are cleared and or frozen in time. And so that was the idea with the interior spaces, to set the background in these spaces. And so I worked from the photographs again quite loosely, and then applied the text. And describing the text kind of describes my relationship to painting, to kind of questions about what does it mean to be in the studio as an artist when you have billions of images in the studio, and yeah, making pictures in the 21st century, considering the internet. I mean, I think ideas of time, scale, and space have really changed a lot in compared to the sort of preconceived notions before the internet of time and space and scale. So
I personally see them being very cinematic.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
don't know if there's a specific narrative that you're trying to convey, or it's just like you have described, like this image that you're trying to translate.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I mean, it's a lot of research about memory. The brain is sort of, we have this continuous film kind of going, and we're just splicing and putting it all together, and we can recall things, and just, and I've made paintings also about the cinematic, the cinema, this idea of recording on a picture, and just kind of making allusion to memory itself. But yeah, I think there is an atmospheric kind of cinematic aspect. Maybe for the lighting. I mean, when you spend a lot of time, I guess, making a picture, you start lighting things, you start kind of arranging the interior, and it's always this process of revealing and concealing too, with the text coming in and blocking certain areas. And so you're always in the process of censoring as well, or choosing information. And yeah.
Etienne, beyond the show, we really just met each other when you came to London,
Yeah.
and we talked over the phone a number of times, and we certainly knew your work and your career. A lot of people, including myself, are curious, what's it like to be an artist full time, in Canada for, you've got 25 years probably
Yeah.
behind you at this, lonely times, late at night, trying to figure something out in a studio by yourself, right? That's sort of the big deal. The people that can survive do, and the ones that can't. But I mean, what are the things you enjoy about being an artist, other than the ability to go to Mexico and say you're working?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to find, to keep that tension taut, where
right.
you're completely in tune with the end of your brush and your ideas and yourself and your life and everything that comes to you, and to protect that project you're working on. And so yeah, it's I think it's extremely demanding. I mean, I think we all demand on ourselves in different ways. um I don't know. I think for me, I've always really tried to put the work first forward and just develop the ideas. It's just something that, from my interest, I'm quite curious. The reason why I started to make art was because I could be interested in everything if I wanted to.
Hmm.
And so but it's how do you discern? How do you navigate? And which lead do you follow? And I mean, it's not an easy profession. Of course, you have to finance it all too. So,
Well, we're
yeah,
helping you with that. That's the good news.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been awesome. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. But it is, I mean, it has to be enjoyable ultimately. Like what I do is not easy, but I enjoy it. So otherwise it would be an awful job, right? Like most jobs if you don't like it. So you
yeah,
must enjoy it
yeah.
ultimately.
And you find these conversations, right? And
Right.
you find people that you can kind of relate sort of ideas
Yeah.
of the world, and so it's
So do
really
you think
important.
that you really, chose your profession or did it choose you?
Yeah, it started early, and I just kind of fell into it. I mean, you sort of, yeah, not sure. I mean, I'm not sure what I was. I'm not sure what I was joining. Right? Like
Right.
I didn't know what I was
Me neither.
joining. Same as going to art school. I mean, I don't know why I went to art school. I mean, this crazy profession. I mean, there was no plan on having a career or anything like that. It just blindly kind of chose things, and then you kind of discover a world.
Hmm. Well, it's interesting. I think, traveling, which you're doing, and you were in New York previous to this, to being in Mexico, and I think that even in my job, it's very healthy to get away and
Yeah,
see home from a distance, and it frees your mind up, like you say, looking at waterfalls and the different landscape that you're in, right? It's very healthy,
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think yeah, it can get your world can get small, especially in the studio.
right?
As you know, it's a lonely profession. There's no two ways about it. It's just hours spent in the studio. At least the way I work.
Right.
So it's um, it's a slow process. I mean, it can go fast as well. I mean, sometimes you can make 4 or 5 paintings a month, and sometimes not.
Right.
So
There
I
are
think for the show, I think once I had I had a few examples of paintings. I had something solid. I think I made 4 paintings quite quickly because I knew the language. I knew it well, and this is something that's going to continue. I just found another form, and this form is maybe 2 years down the line, but to get there will be interesting.
Hmm. Well, that's the skill, isn't it? It separates, you from many other people is that vision, but also the skill
Mm,
to execute something that, maybe is original. And that's, where I think artists are almost like inventors, they invent something like some of your studio mates there I'm familiar with, and, their work is completely theirs and it's original. And that's what
it's
I think makes the art world go around a little bit, or it certainly
yeah,
leads,
yeah.
and it's
It's
fun.
it's fiction, right? A lot of it is fiction, right?
Well, but then it becomes fact. When it's hanging on my
Exactly.
wall
Yeah.
here, it's almost, it goes to nonfiction almost in a way, because it's, physical. It's a physical specimen.
Yeah, but at I'm always amazed that I cannot see my work clearly. How the most significant, the most simple parts are blind to me.
Right.
Yeah.
That's probably good.
there are a couple questions that I'll just read to Etienne.
Sure.
One is I see caricature in your work in the still lives, interior landscapes, and even a few portraits. Many contemporary painters use caricature, from Nicole Eisman, Salman Richter, and Daniel Richter, to name a few. Do you see or do you use caricature because you paint from memory? Is it the Guston influence? And what can you
Mhm.
say about caricature in your work?
Yeah. Uh, it's a little bit of there's a little bit of I'm 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 very approximate the way I paint, and I think Guston's line is so much more an assured line than my line. I don't have that. I'm more of a painter that starts from the inside and finds the edge, whereas Guston, he has such a trained line, and I think both the other painters mentioned as well, Richter and Eisenman, but humor has been a big part of my previous work. I hope it is still part of my work, and it's something I do work at. And I'm not sure if that's the question about humor, but I guess that's how I can maybe talk about this, is that, yeah, there's a trying to find something a little bit looser, a little bit connecting things in a looser way. And I think painting can do that in interesting ways. And that's something I do think about a lot.
Do the map-like paintings or journey paintings also represent a chronology of time, with the journey beginning somewhere, the past, and continuing into the present and maybe beyond?
Yeah. So yeah, for sure. I think I walk the paintings when I paint them, so I can step back, go back in, and sort of, yeah, they're kind of walking journeys most of the time. And so, yeah, they would project in time. And it's funny, a lot of times when I get to the top, it's a little bit more fuzzy. And yeah, maybe project in the future in terms of, well, I'm not sure, but they do are laid down in time for sure. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's not it's just not a straightforward process, but I certainly think about them that way, and I come back to them knowing exactly what that time is. Different, yeah.
Hey,
But they could be
Etienne.
different cities that I explore, so they could switch too,
Someone
So
has written, "Hey, Etienne, what beautiful place you are right now, and how much of your living spaces, home or visited, feed into a new body of work?"
yeah, it's a dilemma, because what do you do when you go somewhere else? Like, do you reinvent everything? Do you keep solid into your vision? So it's a good question. And I asked myself that question. I'm not one to do many residencies, although since 2019 I've done a few more. But they've actually entered my work, all the residencies I've done. I've done them because of interest as well, in terms of where I go. But I can't. Well, I think I've taken on, like I talked about, form here, but I've sort of taken photographs that I've been looking at and making small works, and I might do this an amazing paper making tradition here, but also printmaking, and I might do something with printmaking next week. So yeah.
Nope, that was all for questions.
Okay.
Okay, hi. Sorry about that. You're off to Mexico City in the next week or two?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how long will you be there?
I'm gonna. I'm maybe close to a week. I'm not sure. The elections are happening on June 2nd, so
Oh,
see, it's quite of a moment here, and but
yeah.
so that should be interesting. Yeah, Mexico City is an incredible city, amazing museums, and so it's yeah, I'm looking forward to this. There's great always great shows here, galleries, and I know some people here a bit there, so it should be good.
Yeah.
Someone actually has also asked about your to talk about your experience in China. Obviously, you've traveled quite extensively over your career, and I know it plays an impact in your work. So, can you address that question?
Yeah, well, before I went to China, I've been interested in Chinese ink painting for a long time, and actually experimenting just with just the very medium of ink on paper was one of the most fundamental kind of experience to just see how this paper really just wants to record, and so that was quite significant for me. And so I've been interested in Chinese painting, and so when I went there, it was a big moment for me in terms of learning, and so when I do make a painting like X, I do think about landscape probably in a different way, you know. And there is a tradition also of painters from United States, Canada, Europe to go there, and there's a different concept of space that I think it was quite refreshing to see how picture making has been done and is made there. I certainly feel I felt a real enthusiasm for painting there that I not necessarily felt in, at least in North America, in a while like this. Yeah, so I haven't been back in quite a few years now. So, but
Mhm.
Amazing.
Well,
Thank you very much.
yeah,
thanks so
thank you.
much. Thanks everybody for questions and listening. Appreciate it.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your time
Thank
down
you.
there. And it'd be nice to get home too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm ready to start in the studio pretty soon. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, we'll be in touch.
Okay, thanks so much. Thanks
All
everybody.
the best.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Etienne.
Bye.
Bye bye.